2016 Ford Focus. I'm doing some brake pads on it, but last night the owner hit a wheel on the expressway, an actual wheel. I guess the car had just gotten into an accident and there was a wheel just sitting on the floor. He said he couldn't avoid it, so you could see how it tore off all the shields underneath the car, but also it took chunks out of the transmission housing, so big chunks of metal are missing out of it. It hit the oil pan and created a crack in the oil pan, and now that's leaking. So he said he's just gonna take it to a dealer and let them replace the oil pan. That's crazy. Look at this. Looks like I spoke a little bit too soon, at least for the front rotors, because if we have a look at the backside here, you can see we have a little bit more corrosion that's building up, and if you look at the bottom, you can see there's actually grooves in the rotor, and it's the same thing on the passenger side. So everything went pretty smooth, just as I expected, because it's pretty much a new car still. Got the new rotor on, new set of brake pads, everything's nice and greased. It's good to go, so I'm just gonna go ahead and knock out the other wheels. So as far as the rear pads and rotors, I don't think I'm gonna change any of this. The rotor looks good on both sides, and these brake pads, they're OEM, you know, straight from Jeep, and they got plenty of life on them. So I already talked to the owner and she just said to just leave it then. So I'm gonna go ahead and put everything back together. Here I have a GMC Arcadia. It's here for a starter replacement. The battery is located right here, right behind the rear seat or the passenger seat. Why do I keep finding beer bottles in people's cars? So this one's empty and this one's still full. You know, why is this a common issue? 2021, people getting turned up. But the weirdest thing I found tucked underneath someone's seat is so far a brick. Why is there a brick underneath someone's seat? This is crazy. I don't know. So I got the starter off, as you can see. Got the new one from AutoZone right here. I did have to remove the catalytic converter in order to get to the starter, but honestly it's not that bad of a job. Got the new starter put in already, and in order to get the starter out, you do have to remove the knock sensor, which is right behind it, or else it's never gonna let you remove or install the new starter. So I got the knock sensor put back in, and the only thing I have to do now is put the catalytic converter back on from down here, and then go finish anything else that I have to do up top. Alright, pretty good. Everything sounds good. I don't hear any exhaust leaks or anything like that. So very quickly, I'm just gonna look at the defrost. The owner's saying like it's winter, so the windshield will fog up and she just can't get it to defrost. This Dodge Ram here in the garage, you can see it's only halfway sticking in. This is gonna be the last big vehicle I work on for the winter. If it don't fit in the garage, I'm not working on it. So but here, for a good amount of things, we need to replace the steering shaft coupler, which is this one. We ordered one online, but it's been like 3 weeks and it still hasn't even shipped out. So the owner just went to a salvage yard. He got one for way cheaper than it was to buy a new one, and this one looks to be in pretty good shape. We only need this piece right here. We're getting front stabilizer bar links and bushings, which is what I'm doing right now. We're getting both front CV shafts and the seals for the transmission on the CV shafts. A front left wheel bearing. I just finished removing that bushing from that side. I'm about to take this one off. Now these look like they're all one piece, meaning they don't have a slot in them like when you buy a new one to take them off. So the only real way to get them off is to just cut them off. So I've already gone ahead and did that, and then you can just peel them off. Try to knock off the big chunks of rust that are on here, because it's going to end up destroying the new bushing if you don't try to clean it up. Alright, so I'm done putting the bushings on both sides. We have new stabilizer links on both sides already. Now I'm not going to bolt any of this stuff down just yet, because I'm about to pull out the CV shaft, and it probably doesn't matter, but I want to try to give myself as much space as I can. So in case I have to move the stabilizer link or the sway bar for any reason, I can easily. So I'm going to leave it hanging right there for now. So I'm going to go ahead and start ripping out this CV shaft. You can see right there we have a small tear in the boot, and it's allowing the grease to come out. And also we have a new seal for right back there where that CV shaft goes into that housing. So let me start taking all this stuff apart. So it doesn't look like I'm gonna be replacing this axle today, because when I go to pull it out of here, it comes with the entire shaft. There's like an intermediate shaft in the center right there, and it connects you know, everything together. But the issue I'm having here is the intermediate shaft is like rusted solid onto the axle. And initially I was like, okay, that's fine, we'll replace the intermediate shaft, right? Because it's like a $50 part, no big deal, whatever. The problem is the way this thing is designed, when you pull it out far enough, the CV axle actually hits right here on this bump stop. So it doesn't allow you to pull it, because that shaft is long. Doesn't allow you to actually fit it out of here, and it's not touching the shock absorber at all. It really is just this thing right here. I don't know, I think I'm just gonna leave it alone, put it back together, and just yeah, I'm not doing this. It sucks because I've done so much work already, but it is what it is. I'm just eating up time here, wasting time, honestly, trying to get this to work when I know damn well it's not going to be able to separate. It's not going to work. I might as well just put it back together and cut my losses. I decided to just give you guys another look at exactly what I'm talking about. So you could see the CV axle is trying to pull the entire shaft out. It's supposed to separate right here. But yeah, like I said, there's something sticking out of there. I don't know if it's like silicone, something hard, and it looks like a rubber type. Anyway, you could see, so you figure, all right, I'll just pull the whole thing out. Well, it's hitting right here, and there's no way around it. We don't have an issue with the shock, because I could just easily unbolt it from up here and get it out the way. You can see we're not coming in contact with the shock just yet, but we are hitting right here, and you can't bend it any further out to bring it out this way, because that shaft is so long you can only get so much of an angle on it. Yeah, so this sucks to come this far and then to, you know, have to stop and just go back and put everything back together because I can't get this separated. So I got everything put back together. Unfortunately, we could not change that part, so it is what it is. I already called the owner and let him know what's going on. Tomorrow I'll try the CV shaft on the driver's side and see how that goes. It should go a lot easier because it doesn't have a intermediate shaft. As you can see, I already tightened up everything for the sway bar, links and bushings. Everything is back installed. It's now the next day, and I've already started on the left side of the car. I've already removed the 3 bolts that hold on the wheel bearing, and we're gonna go ahead and see if this tool can remove it. And there you have it. It popped the wheel bearing off, no problem at all. Now it's time to clean up all this corrosion that's sitting here on the knuckle. Okay, so I've cleaned off the corrosion off of the knuckle, and I sprayed it already with the CRC. I cleaned off the corrosion on the backing plate where the wheel bearing is gonna mount. I'm just gonna go ahead and spray that as well, and also spray the back side of the wheel bearing, just to slow down some of the corrosion. Alright, so unfortunately I can't get this axle off either. I know. You're just shaking your head at the screen right now, but it is what it is. Yesterday I wasted so much time trying to get the other side out just to get nowhere with it, and I'm not gonna do the same thing today. Okay, I don't want to waste that much time. It's just it really sucks. So yeah, just gonna have to skip it. If the owner wants it done, he could take it to a shop, let them deal with it. Not gonna waste any more time on this. So I'm just gonna go ahead, put the knuckle back on it. It's got the new wheel bearing. This is the part we need. Okay, so I went on Amazon, ordered the part, and the shipping info for that part was not getting updated. So we honestly didn't know when it was gonna come in, and it's already been like a week and a half or 2 weeks or something like that. Today's Saturday, so he went to the junkyard today. He got this part for like $45, and guess what comes in the mail today? The part. And you can't return this part. The only thing you can do is get like credit at the salvage yard, which is kind of useless for him. We got to get this steering shaft linkage out of here. Look how bad this is. So actually, remember how I said the owner wants to use the junkyard part? Well, the junkyard part feels absolutely amazing compared to this one that's on the car. But then when I opened up the new part yesterday, which by the way is a dormant part, but anyway, when I opened up the new part and I compared it to the junkyard one, there's a night and day difference. So even though the junkyard one is an upgrade, there's still a difference between a brand new part and a used part. Just a freaking nightmare to work on. Okay, so I got that bolt out, the one that goes right there, right on top. You see all the white powder everywhere? That's a corrosion. I had to heat it up. Well, heat up the metal piece that the bolt goes through. And then hit it with the impact gun, and I seriously thought I was just gonna snap the head off of that bolt. I mean, just the corrosion here is just crazy. I'm suspecting even if I could get the two bolts off, I think I'm gonna have a really hard time trying to separate the two shafts from each other. So let's see how this goes. It's not fun, and I'm already not happy about doing this. So I got the lower bolt off, and that was also a pain in the butt. I was this close to throwing in the towel and just saying screw this. I'm just gonna tell him I can't do it, because you know, if you break off one of these bolts or you round off one of the heads, because it's such a difficult angle to get to these things, it's almost like game over. You're gonna open up a can of worms for yourself. But thankfully I did get it off, and once the bolts were out, it wasn't too bad to get it moving. A little bit of tapping on the bottom with a small hammer got it moving. But yeah, this joint is completely wasted. So we have a replacement. This is a Dorman part. So there goes the part number right there. And like the junkyard part we have over there somewhere, it feels good. It feels way better than this one. But then when you compare it to a brand new unit, it's a 9-day difference. This one's nice and solid, and it moves very freely. The one from the junkyard obviously has some play in it because it's a used part. So the new part is gonna go on the car. Get a shot of this so you guys could see the amount of play that's in this thing. And that's only one end right there. Every other joint is just this loose. So you add it all up, and it equates to, you know, X amount of play in the steering wheel. That's not really moving the wheels at all, and that becomes difficult for a wheel alignment technician to get your wheel alignment dead on, because your steering wheel is never really dead on. So so it's the reason why they told him the wheel bearing and this part has to be changed before they could do a wheel alignment on the car. Alright, so we ran into a little bit of a problem. The bottom side slips on just fine. Those are all the same, but the tops are different. So this is the one that came off the car. You can see it has a relatively round profile, and if we look at the Dorman part, you can see it's more of a square. Okay, and then if we come, I figure, alright, we'll just skip the Dorman part and we will go over to the junkyard unit. When I check this one, it also has a pretty much a square profile. So the one that came off this car is really specific. The only thing that's stopping it from going on is that basically I would have to remove some material from the two sides right here to make the hole more of a round shape. I thought about modifying the Dorman one since it's the newer unit, but look at the difference in what Dorman made versus original ones. You could see all the material right that's left, or how thick this piece is. Right, look at the Dorman one, how thin it is. They didn't leave much material right there, which I'm not surprised. That's Dorman for you, always finding the cheapest way out of things, right? It's probably cheaper to make that small thing than it is to make something this big. So I think I'm going to try to modify the junkyard one. It's decent. I mean, it should do the trick. Okay, so on the old part right here, and we have about 19 millimeters right there. If we come over to this part, we got about 17 millimeters. So I don't have to take off much. Okay, so at first I started off pretty aggressive with that bit on the die grinder, and then I moved over to a sanding wheel on my drill. So at the bottom here, we have like 18.7 millimeters, and right at the very top, we got about 19.2. Okay, so not too bad, and the board looks nice and clean inside of there, no corrosion. So I'm gonna go ahead and test fit it. And there we go. Part slides on perfectly, slides on just enough to get the pinch bolt inside of it, and that should be it because the bottom half already slides on. So I cleaned everything up. I put some anti-seize inside of this end and this end to stop it from not seizing in the future. I cleaned up the threads on the bolts and put a little bit of blue thread locker on here because it looked like there was some blue thread locker on here from factory. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pop it on now. So everything is all tightened down on both ends and it's good to go. I got in the car and checked the steering wheel and it feels much more solid than it did before, so I think it turned out good. Now when I was taking all of this apart to get to the wheel bearing, I ended up destroying the threads on the outer tie rod and the nut that was on here. And the reason for that is because I couldn't get the tie rod off and I was, you know, trying to be in a rush. So I grabbed my tool and my air hammer. This thing goes on air hammer. You put your socket on here, you screw on the nut and make sure you get full thread engagement and you use the air hammer to knock it out, you know what I mean? And 9 out of 10 times it works perfectly without damaging anything. But this tie rod was stuck on here so bad that you can imagine what an air hammer is going to do to some threads if something doesn't want to move, right? Something has to give. So I ended up messing up the threads on the tie rod and I completely destroyed the nut that was on here. The point is, I took it all apart and I ran a die over it and I completely fixed all the threads on the tie rod. And then I went through my, see, here goes the nut that was on here. It's completely mangled up. You can't use that. So then I went through my collection of nuts and bolts and I found another castle nut. And now I got it to the point where everything just threads on by hand perfectly. Okay, so here's the moral of this story is that shit happens, okay? Sometimes things go sideways when you're working on a car. But the point here is you have to fix it. Because I know plenty of people, and I've seen this before, if they do something like this, what do? They run that same exact nut back on there and they just hit it on there with the impact gun just so it gets tight. They don't care if it's cross-threaded or not. Send it, ship it, right? That's all that matters, is that it holds so they could send it down the road. That's not how you do things. If you mess something up, fix it, make it right. Alright, so I'm all done with the truck. As you can see, I pulled it out the garage, but he has a loud noise coming from the power steering pump. And yesterday when he was here, I pointed out that, hey, your power steering line is leaking. And he's like, how? I just had the whole thing replaced. So let's have a closer look at this. As you can see, that is in fact a brand new power steering pump. I did not put this on. I don't know where he took it to get it done. You can even see that line right there. It's pretty much brand new. That clamp isn't even doing anything. The clamp should be up there where it's clamped onto. There's no plastic underneath it, so it's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. After I move up the clamp, I'm just gonna go ahead and fill up the system with new power steering fluid, because as you can see inside of here, this one's pretty low, and honestly that fluid doesn't even look too good. So kind of makes you question you know, the people that change the pump, what fluid did they put in here. Alright, so I don't hear any more clunking coming from up front from the stabilizer links and bushings. The power steering isn't making any more noise since I put fluid in it. And the steering response is actually really good. Before, there was a ton of play in the steering wheel. If you move the steering wheel, it wouldn't really affect the car at all. But now, any little bit of movement in the steering wheel, it works as it should. It just feels very direct. The wheel bearing, I didn't notice any noise from the beginning. It was just a loose wheel bearing. It wasn't making noise at this point. So that's not really made a difference, other than the car probably handles better. Here I have a 14 Nissan Sentra and I'm just doing a quick tune-up on it. And again, the cabin air filter. Look at this thing. We have another one, guys. So yeah, it's pretty nasty. We just pop in a new one and it'll be all set. I'm in a 2012 Chevy Cruze Turbo. This is the car that a few months ago I diagnosed that it had a bad turbo and actually replaced the turbo on it myself. And then she was having overheating issues because I believe her water pump was leaking, but she kind of ignored the problem. And then when she finally brought it to me to replace the water pump, it turned out that the head gasket had already been blown because she was still driving the car even though it had no coolant in it from, you know, the water pump leaking. So I had to turn the job down. I told her, hey, I'm not going to put this water pump on and I'm not doing this head gasket, so you're going to have to take it to a shop. So that was months ago. And the car is back and it seems to be driving fine. So the only thing I can assume is she took it to a shop and got the head gasket fixed, or just got the leak fixed, okay? But now it's back for brakes because she took it to a shop and they said, hey, this thing needs brakes all the way around. The brakes are grinding. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to pop new rotors and pads all the way around. And I just moved it up a few feet and I could hear the grinding. So it's, yeah, there's no more friction material left on these brake pads. So I'm just going to pull it into the garage and get it taken care of. Here goes the rear brakes. Here goes the front brakes, and this is the side that I hear all the grinding on, so I'm assuming the inside pad is just metal on metal. So I got this side off, as you can see, and yeah, so there goes the damage. So nothing really special to see here. I'm just gonna go ahead and knock out all these brakes. Done with the rear brakes. Yeah, so the rear brakes were not grinding, but this is the condition of the rear rotors. So you can see they needed to be replaced. I have a 97 Cadillac Deville here. It's here for misfires. The owner said something about us getting a warning message saying to turn off the engine or something like that. I did not experience any of that, and honestly I really don't even feel the misfires. But pulled up some codes here, and here's the codes that we have. Alright, I took a screenshot of the misfire counter. Now this is the history, because the current misfire we're not getting anything. So I went into history. As you can see, some cylinders are misfiring a lot more than others, but still we kind of have misfires all across the board here for the most part. Let's see if this thing has a clear flood mode. Okay, sounds pretty good to me. I'm not hearing anything that jumps out at me, like a cylinder that's not contributing or something like that, so that sounds good. Pulled out the first 4 spark plugs in front just because they're easy to get to, just to have a look at them. They don't look too bad. They are full of crap though. It looks like someone just slobbed anti-seize all over these things, and I could see signs of like dielectric grease on each of the boots. Someone's been in here recently. Since we have most of our misfires on cylinders 1 and 2, I wanted to look at the ignition coils. First thing I noticed is one of them has been replaced already. As you can see, this one is not an original coil, but here goes number 1 right here. You can see it's marked, and I don't see number 2 anywhere else, so I'm going to assume number 2 is one of these that's on the new coil right here. Sometimes if you're having, for example, if we had a large amount of misfires only on cylinders 1 and 4, then you could start to suspect a bad ignition coil, because you could see it feeds both of those cylinders. But that's not the case here, because most of our misfires are on 1 and 2, which I'm assuming is this coil right here. It doesn't mean we can't still have bad coils, it's just something to point out. And one key thing that the owner told me is it acts up or misfires when the engine's hot. Okay, so if I just turn it on like I've been doing and just let it sit for 5 minutes, it's not going to misfire. He said you got to drive it for like 30-40 minutes and then it'll start misfiring. So the heat is contributing. Do we have a issue with fuel injectors that when they get heat soaked, they start to misfire? Alright, so I got to the fuse panel here, but I'm going to get the scope and look at the fuel injectors, get the current clamp on them. First thing I notice is I pull out the fuse for the fuel injector, and it's really hard to see with the light, but there is corrosion on here. And if we look inside of here, more of the green crusties. Yeah. Alright, well, I'm going to go ahead and still put the current clamp on it. Alright, so far everything looks good. The engine is running good, no misfires. But the thing is, this car has 2 fuses for injectors. So one fuse is going to feed 4 injectors and the other fuse is going to feed the other 4. And I don't have 2 of these fuse jumper thingamajiggles. I don't know what they're called. But yeah, I'm going to have to go on AES Wave and order another one, because you absolutely need 2 of them when you're dealing with situations like this where you need, or a car has 2 fuses for all the injectors. So I'm going to have to order another one. But as of right now, I think what I'm going to do is let the car run, let it heat up, and see if we start to experience any misfires. And if I have to, I'll jump over to the other fuel injector and see if we could see something that's going on. So the car has been running for, I don't know, 30-40 minutes. It's up to temperature, everything's hot, and still no misfires here on the scanner. But I get in the car, right, because I just kind of took my lunch right now, and this is what I see. We got the oil light on, low oil pressure, stop engine. So I talked to the owner. This is the problem he's having. He said, yeah, that's what it's there for. So his complaint is not even misfires. His complaint is that the oil light turns on and it keeps telling him to turn off the engine low oil pressure. So let's use the scanner once again. All right, so this is the only data we could get out of this thing. You can see the engine oil level says okay. Oil pressure, it just says low, so I would imagine it would either say low, okay, or high. It's super common for these oil pressure sensors to go bad, so I think that's gonna be my next step, but obviously not today. It's dark outside and the engine is hot. I'm not gonna go poking around things. Now the next morning, and I could definitely tell that the oil pressure sensor right there is leaking. You see the connector all wet on it, and the sensor itself looks very moist. Now I could struggle to try to get the sensor out of here. You know, you can see we got plenty of things in the way. People are saying online that it's way easier to just remove the oil filter and then remove the entire housing off of the engine block, and you could just change the sensor while it's off of the car. As you can see, I got the part off of the car. Not too bad. It just has two 10mm bolts holding it on, which go right here and right here. Zip them out and the piece falls right off. It's kind of a good thing to go ahead and change the sensor like this, because now you get to replace these O-rings that, you know, these things never ever get replaced. And honestly, these aren't horrible. They still kind of flex without breaking, but it's never a bad idea to go ahead and get them changed out. So we have some AC Delco parts right here, and we're going to use a Duralast sensor because it's what we got. I always recommend like a AC Delco sensor, but it is what it is. At least it's not a value crap part, right? Or value crap. Yeah, so with the part off of the car, I'm gonna go ahead and zip the sensor off of it. And if we look inside of here, look at that, it's completely filled with oil inside of there. So yeah, no doubt about it that this sensor is bad and it has to get changed out. And it's pretty much all set. We got the new sensor installed and torqued down, got the new O-rings on it. I even cleaned up the face of where the oil filter goes, so I'm just gonna go ahead and bolt it back on the car. So I'm trying to clean off the connector that plugs into the oil pressure sensor because it's full of oil, so you want to make sure you clean it off as best as you can. I'm trying to get a little bit of brake parts cleaner into where the pins are to clean all the oil outside of there. But thing is, you can see where we're at. It's just about 32 degrees Fahrenheit out here, and at this temperature with brake parts cleaner just flowing down your arm, it is freaking freezing out here. My hands are freezing, so I'm trying to get this job done as fast as possible because it's cold, man. It's cold. Wow. So I'm pretty much done here. As you can see, everything is back in place. Just want to make sure you clean up the mating surface that's on the block where the new O-rings are gonna sit, so you don't have any leaks. The oil filter is now nice and tight. I just have to put this shield back on, the one that goes right here. It's been running for about 5 minutes so far. This is crazy. Look at that. 10 miles average miles per gallon. Ugh. I'll trade this sucker in a heartbeat. It's all about those MPGs. And for anyone wondering why I didn't wear gloves that are just warm while I'm working out here, I do have gloves for that. The reason why I'm wearing the latex gloves is because I use them whenever I'm dealing with oil, because obviously you don't want the oil to soak into any type of fabric. It's just gonna ruin your gloves. So whenever I'm dealing with oil, it's latex gloves only. That way you can just peel them off and throw them out. Alright, so this thing has been running for just about an hour almost, and the only reason for that is because I had another car to look at, and I just kept it running in the meantime, just to make sure no leaks pop up and that the sensor's okay. So you can see the engine's still running and no warning sign, no oil pressure light. And here goes the scan data. Get this without a glare. You can see our temperature is over 200 degrees. Engine oil pressure says okay, and the engine runtime, it's about 55 minutes so far. So that's it. This one's fixed, and the owner could come pick it up. Honestly, for being a 97, this thing is pretty clean inside of here. The body's pretty clean on the outside. The car rides pretty smooth, and the inside looks in decent condition. It's actually one of the nicer Cadillacs I've seen around here. But that's it for this one. Got my cousin's Toyota Sienna here. He just bought it a few months ago, and it's here for basically a tune-up and just look over it, see what it needs, changing fluids and things like that. I don't know what year it is, like maybe like 04, 06, yeah, maybe 04. But it sucks because in order to get to the spark plugs in this thing, obviously you gotta take off the manifold. In order to take the manifold off, you gotta take off the whole wiper assembly in this whole thing, which is this big old metal piece right here. So that kind of sucks. Yeah, so as you can see, I got the manifold off, and I did go ahead and order like new gaskets for everything. So that's why I took everything apart for the throttle body to get all these gaskets replaced while we're in here. The guy he bought this car from said that he kept up with the maintenance and blah blah blah, right? Classic stuff. Anyway, the front pads and rotors, it looked like someone kept pad slapping it, so we replaced the pads and rotors up front. Yeah, so much for keeping up with maintenance, right? Here goes the rear shoes on it, and if you look closely, there is not much. You can see we have a little bit of friction material right there at the top, but look at the bottom, it's like damn near all the way gone. So we replaced the rear shoes and the hardware kit. I was gonna replace the drums, but here's the problem with that. Not the problem, but I kind of screwed up because when I ordered the rear brakes for his van, I thought he had rear disc brakes. I had no idea it had drum brakes until he showed up. So, you know, all those parts have to get sent back, and we just ran to AutoZone and picked up some new shoes and hardware kit. And the drums from the inside, they looked like they were okay, so we just reused the drums. So here goes the wiper linkage assembly that I said we had to remove from up top. Now here goes the, to get this out the way. Alright, so that's the cabin air filter. And then here goes the air filter for the engine. Okay. And this is all from the previous owner who told my cousin, oh yeah, I kept up on the maintenance very well. I did everything I had to do when it was supposed to get done. Yeah, no. It doesn't look like he did very much. At least the good thing is it looks like the timing belt was changed back in 2013. So yeah, it has some years on it, but at least it's not the original timing belt. Oh, we also changed the serpentine belt because, oh, and the power steering belt because they both said Toyota on them, and they look like they were just ready to disintegrate, okay, like just turn into dust. So we got the new belts put on, and everything on this freaking van is a nightmare. Nothing is going smoothly, but it's coming along. Like I said, I did everything else. I just have to, I got the new spark plugs in it. I just have to finish putting this intake manifold back on it, and the last thing we're going to do is do an oil change. And for anyone who's wondering, yes, it's the same cousin who has the Accord that I bought for him and I fixed up. And yes, he still has the Accord, and yes, it's still driving. He uses it every day. He just needed a second car, a larger car for, you know, family things. But he still drives the Accord every single day. Right, so I pretty much have all of the new gaskets on the intake manifold, so it's ready to go back on the car. Here's the ones we changed. This one goes right back here on this piece. Obviously, this one goes for the runners. And then we got two of them for the throttle body, the main throttle body, and then the mounting plate. So, yeah, it's good that all this stuff gets replaced while we're in here. And it looks like it's ready to get thrown back on the car. Alright, so everything is pretty much done on this van. So we are in this Toyota. We took it out for a test drive. Now, initially, when I turned it on, it had a really high idle, like over 2,000 RPM, and I thought, okay, maybe it's just a high idle because of the cold start. But no, we let it run for a while, and even after it was up to temperature, we even took it out for a test drive like 2 or 3 times around the block, and still it came down a little bit, but we had like 1,700 RPM for idle. I knew it wasn't a vacuum leak because I checked on the scanner and the short-term field trims weren't indicating a vacuum leak anywhere, so I wasn't really concerned with that. But I just couldn't wrap my mind or figure out what was causing this really high idle. So I decided I was going to connect my scanner here and do a idle relearn. But after about 20 minutes of the van running now, we're about 20-25 minutes so far, it actually dropped down to normal. So I'm trying to think what was causing this. Now, that air filter for the engine was completely clogged, okay? So I wonder if and they had been driving like that for a while. So I wonder if the ECM was trying to compensate for the lack of airflow by trying to suck in more air. And now that we finally put a clean air filter on the car, you know, the ECM needed to readjust itself. It's the only thing I could think of, because obviously what I did, there was nothing wrong with it. It was simply just, it just needed to relearn, I guess. It's idling real nice now.